Yo guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. So I've just jumped on today to do my pre-market forecast, and this is the pre-market Forex forecast for the week commencing the 25th of July 2022. So guys, before we do get started, I will just draw your attention to the written version of this analysis. So the written version of this forecast will be available linked in the description. So if you guys want to check this out, just click the link in the description. And also guys, before we do start, if you do appreciate this content, please do like and subscribe, as I'm super grateful for that. Alright guys, let's get started. So starting with Nzdusd this week. So Nzdusd, what we can see is we're in a clear downtrend. It's pretty much the same, well, it's exactly the same daily structure as what we had last week. So for me, what I'm interested in is we've essentially got two order blocks to sell from. We've got, oh sorry guys, I'm on the 2-day. I thought I'd confused the structure there. So we've basically got these two order blocks to sell from. So the first order block that we've got to sell from is this one here. So this is the last bullish buy candle before we actually saw that next break structure come through. So that's why for me this is a clear order block for sells. So for me we are just expecting a continuation of sells. The first place that I'm looking for that sell to continue from is going to be this order block here. So what we can see is that price has actually now tapped into it. So for me, going into next week, I think really it's fair game now for price to just continue away from this area. In this case that this is where it's going to go from, the institutions have now mitigated with this wick. So for me, I do think price now can just move away from here, following through with the downtrend to then make lower lows. So start of the week, I'm going to be looking for my entry patterns for sells coming away from this area, and what I'll be expecting is for it is just going to continue down to make lower lows. Now within the overall structure, we have still got this order block up here. So what we could see, if this doesn't hold, then it does make sense for price to come back up to here. So if we don't see this high hold, if this rejection candle doesn't follow through, then I will just be anticipating price to continue further up. But the first thing I'm going to look at next week is sells away from this order block here. And then, yeah, if this does fail, then I do think we'll see movement further up into this area. But considering that we've got a pretty decent order block there, we've got clear imbalance confluence, and we have now tapped into that, I am just expecting it to sell away from there. So just looking at the 4-hour now though, on the 4-hour, we're basically in a range from this high here down to this low here. So on the 4-hour, what we've got is a bullish order block. So we've got a clear bullish order block there, and that is also taking us into this daily sales order block. So for me, whilst I do expect sales overall on NZD, so the highest probability in my opinion is that we'll continue to sell out of here to then break structure. What I will be watching is how price actually reacts to this order block down here, because in the situation where we're not going to respect this high and we are going to end up breaking through the high, in that situation I would expect the bullish move which breaks the high to start from this order block down here, and that's just because this is the last sell move before the last break structure on the 4-hour, and we've also got that imbalance there. So going into NZD USD this week, I think right at the start of the week, we can look at the 1 hour, the 15-minute, see if we can get an entry for sales coming away from here. Now, when we get down to this area here, if we do get then buy patterns coming in on the lower time frame, like the 5-minute, then I'll be happy to buy following that, and then we can just see what happens with NZD. But hopefully between them two, we can get an entry regardless to which direction it's going to go. So start of the week, selling out of this area. Once we do get down here, if we do get down here, we can look for that buy to counter trend, which will basically hedge the overall sell position. And then if we do get that buy coming through and this high doesn't hold, I will anticipate that buy to then take us up into this area here. And then we can obviously continue with this counter trend bullish move before we then hit up into this order block here, at which point I would look to sell off, but I highly doubt that all that is going to happen next week. So most likely for the week coming on NZD, there's just this daily order block for sells, so we can sell out of there. Then there's the 4-hour order block for buys, and we can buy out of there. So that is NZD USD this week for me. So moving on to AUD. So on AUD, it's actually quite a bit of a different structure to Nzdusd. So we've had this break here, which originated from this wick here, which I spoke about last week, and then we have this break. So overall, because the last 2 consecutive breaks that were in the same direction were bearish, we have got a bearish trend, which gives us a bearish bias. So based on that bearish bias, we obviously didn't respect this order block here. So for me now, what I'm expecting is that this wick here is a liquidity grab above this high, and that we will now just see a bearish continuation coming away from this area here, and we can respect the sell thesis, and then we can see price make lower lows to break this low. So that's what I'm overall anticipating on the daily on AU, and that's because we are in a bearish bias. So for me, at the minute, until we see the body close above this high here, I am just seeing this whole situation as a liquidity grab to get liquidity from these highs here. So right now, I think start of a week, we can look for sells coming away from this order block here. I think that makes perfect sense. So we can look for sells respecting the southeast invalidation. Now, the only thing about it for me in terms of looking for sells is if we look at the 4 hour, we are just in a clearly bullish structure on the 4 hour, and our most recent break is this break structure here, which originated from this low here. So for me, what I'm essentially thinking is that whilst I do expect sells overall, what we could see is just a bullish continuation coming away from this 4 hour structure. So for me personally, I'm not going to bother with AU this week on the high time frame until we see that 4 hour broken. Now, for me, there's too much of a chance that it could go up for me to just look for sells when we've got that clear 4 hour order block, which could cause bullish price action. And then at the same time, I'm not really happy buying it out of there because we've got this bearish order block from the daily. So I think really the best thing to do is either wait for a break to the high, then we can look to follow for buys, or wait for a break of this to the low, and then we can follow away for sells. But as it stands, it is still a valid sell just because we are in this daily order block, and it's also a valid buy just because we're in the 4 hour order block. So really depends what happens on the lower time frame. But for me, like I say, I am just going to wait and see how this 4 hour structure plays out, and then I'll take it from there with AUD this week. But also something to be aware of. So looking at the daily, we have obviously now got this bullish break structure. So that's where the price is broken above this high here. And what that's left behind is a bullish order block, which is this big candle here. I'm sure there's some better refinements of that on the lower time frames, but I'm just doing it as a rough forecast for now. So what we've also got is this bullish situation. So what we could see is that price does actually reject from this area or even breaks above and then starts to retrace. And with that retracement, we'll see price tap back into here before then going to make new highs after mitigating this order block. So that's AUD USD this week really. We've got similar to NU, we can sell out of the order block that we're in right now. Now what we can also do is buy following the 4 hour. So that's going to be this move here. And then what we can also do is buy following the daily. So that's what I'm anticipating on Nzdusd. As I say, we are still technically in downtrend based on these break structure, so I do think that it's more likely to sell off than it is to continue buying up. But I'll just go with what structure shows me this week. Alright, so moving on to Euro Dollar. So Euro Dollar, quite a bit simpler than AUD. We've just got a bearish situation because we've seen this big impulsive leg of structure. Now, for me, the real order block that I'm most interested in selling from is this one up here. So that's the one that I'm interested in, which is at the extreme. But what I'm also aware of, we've got this demand here, which has imbalance, and sorry, not demand, this supply here, which has imbalance, and that is actually what directly caused the break structure. So what we could see is price actually just reacts off this area and never comes up to here. So I think it's wise to consider both situations just because obviously we're on the daily time frame, so we can get information from the lower time frame structures to see if it is going to react off here before entering any trades. So for me on the daily, I do think we're likely to see price continue upwards into one of these two areas before then selling off. So based on that logic, on the 4 hour, I do think we can look for counter trend buys, and we do actually have a decent situation on the 4 hour. So the last break structure on the 4 hour was this one here. So we've had a bullish break structure. So we're now in a range between this low and this high. Now we've got a clear order block which has already been tapped into. So for me at this point, I think it's fair to just look for buys following probably the 1 hour, the 4 hour. And essentially what we're looking at doing is buying away from this reaction. So depending on what you guys use for your entry patterns, I think it would be sensible to basically look for buys away from this area, anticipating that price is going to come up into there. But I wouldn't recommend using an 80 pip stop loss. So it's possible now, because we've already tapped into here, it's possible that price will just continue to shoot off. So we might not get another entry, but potentially we will get an entry. And what I think is going to happen is essentially we've already tapped into here now, so we will now just continue to break the high on the 4 hour, taking us up here on the daily. All right, so that is euro dollar. So pound dollar now. So pound dollar, we're in a clear sell thesis, and that's because we've had the last two break structure on the daily is bearish. So for me, we're going to be in a bearish trend until we see this high broken here. Now, in terms of following that bearish trend, what I was looking at is the same two POIs as last week. What we've seen is that this one's actually not being closed above yet. So for me, it still makes sense that price can just sell off out of here. And right now, I am still expecting price to sell off from this area until we get a body close above this high here, until we get a candle body closing above it, I will just expect price to sell off to continue to make lower lows, continuing this overall downtrend. Now, if price does get above this high and does close above it, then I'm still going to be of a bearish opinion, but I will just be anticipating that price is going to retrace up into this order block here to mitigate before we then see it continue following this path instead of this one. So based on what I'm seeing, I think right now we should just be looking for sells out of this area. Now, if the 4 hour breaks, so this are 4 hour high at the minute, if the 4 hour breaks, then at that point I'll be a lot less happy about the selling from here, and I'll probably be looking for buys following from the 4 hour structure. So we'll have to see what happens with GU. But what it's basically coming to is initially we're looking for sells out of here. If that high doesn't get respected, then we can expect that price is going to go higher and eventually end up here and most likely tapping this order block here. So in a situation where this high doesn't get respected, we see price break above it, I'll expect price to buy up from the 4 hour order block, which causes this break structure, and we can just look to follow that 4 hour bullish structure until we end up here, at which point we can look for ourselves. So that is pound dollar this week. Now pound yen. So for me at the minute, like I spoke about this structure a few times in the last few weeks. So we've essentially got two situations going on. We've got this bullish situation here. So we've got this bullish leg of structure, but then we've also got this big bullish order block down here, which currently is unmitigated. Now last week, I was expecting that maybe price would continue upwards out of this area here, which is actually what's happened, and we did actually break before our structure to go bullish last week. Now, since then, however, we've had this low formed, so that was basically where you'd think it would respect if it was going to continue bullish, and then we've had that low broken, and that's left behind a clear order block with imbalance on the 4 hour. Now, so within that, we know that there's a lot of space within this POI still. Like we've got that wick there, so there could easily be unmitigated order blocks in there. We've also got this OB right down here. So for me, based on the fact that we've seen this 4 hour break structure and we've got clear reasons for price to come lower, and for me, I don't find this whole buy situation convincing just because we've not really seen that aggressive follow through like you might expect. So for me, I am just looking at sells out of this order block next week on pound yen, and that's what I'm anticipating next week. So pound yen, the only thing I'm anticipating next week is this sell here, and then if this sell doesn't hold, if we see that high broken, I'll reevaluate and I'd look to follow the 4 hour structure for buys. But next week, going into the week, I do just expect pound yen to retrace up here, then we can look for that sell off following this overall bearishness that's been in the market recently. Alright guys, so that's it for this week. Hope you guys have enjoyed watching, and I hope you guys have a great trading week this week. Make sure you stick to your plans, make sure you stick to your risk management, and trade safe, guys. Cheers for watching. Have a good one, guys.